Morning, Tri-Cities. It's 9 on Friday, and so it's time for Coffee with Karl. I'm Karl Dye from TRIDEC, and today is the next series of our economic outlook for 2021. We're going to talk about residential housing today, and it's my honor to introduce our first guest, John Keltch from Tri-City Association of Realtors. He's the board president. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Karl.
Thanks for joining us this morning.
Oh, glad to be here.
All right. And Jeff Losey is the executive director of a Home Builders Association of Tri-Cities. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Karl. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Thanks for being on. Well, it is our traditional Coffee with Karl. We start off with coffee or mugs, and I just rolled out the old www.tridec.org. This was from our archives way before my time, but it was a mug that we had when we first had a website in the late 90s, which doesn't seem like that long ago, but I think, you know, especially in today's COVID era where we're doing everything by Zoom and remotely, it's interesting to look back over that time frame of, you know, how important a digital presence is. I know you guys use it obviously all the time for communications to your members and sales and marketing and all those other things. So I figured that was kind of a good rollout for this morning. So let's start with Jeff. Jeff, what do you got for a mug or a coffee this morning?
Well, this morning I got my Habitat for Humanity mug. You know, cool that they added a hammer on the end of it as your
cool
handle device. But one of our great community partners feel a great need in Tri-Cities, and so we've partnered with them and helped build 6 homes around Tri-Cities. So here's to Habitat.
Oh, that's awesome. And being a new Tri-Citian, I have checked out the Restore, right, where they have the surplus materials you can go buy, and I think that supports Habitat for Humanity in Richland.
Yes.
So
Yep,
that's awesome. All right, John, let's see what you got. I'm hoping it's going to be like Captain Marvel or something from the Marvelverse with that stuff you got behind there.
Well, you know, not so much. I never have learned to drink coffee and typically hot beverages, you know, maybe some cocoa once in a while. But my normal morning is drinking this a couple of times. And being in Atlanta Cougars, it's, you know, you got to represent when you can.
Well, that's great. The Cougars.
I feel bad because Jeff's doing community partners, and I'm just going, yeah, okay, go Dogs, and it just, yeah.
I just want to make sure that, you know, we're not, you know, we're not biased, and, you know, your camera might not accidentally turn off during the presentation, or your slides might not load because, you know, just saying,
audio kicks on and off a little bit. Yeah, no, I understand. You know,
bandwidth issues, you know, it comes up. So for everybody listening today on Zoom, we'll use the question and answer feature. If you have a question, please put it out there and we'll try to work it into our conversation. If you're listening on Facebook or social media, you can put your question into the comment section. And again, we'll work it in. So we're going to kick this off. I think, John, you've got a few slides to talk about what's going on in the real estate market. And why don't you, if we're going to share your screen or Tracy's got it, let's go through those.
Okay, I can do that. Put that up there and get started. You know, as it turns out, you know, doing this last year becomes real easy to do it again this year. Trying to look at a residential housing outlook, you know, and I believe the same results are the same results we're going to have from last year, from 19 into 20. Although 20 was fraught with drama, it turned out to be a pretty good year. I think personally, and from the experience I've had and watching things, yeah, it's going to be an incredible year because none of the major indicators that I look at are changing. Now they can change, but I don't predict them or don't see them. I mean, yeah, my crystal ball is still in the shop, has been for quite a few years, waiting for parts. But with, again, like a lot of the indicators that are looked at, we should be in a good spot. I mean, again, supply and demand is always going to be an issue, and that, you know, going to talk to you a little bit about, you know, are we really in a housing shortage? Well, yes, there's not a lot on the market at any one time, but over the course of a year, we are still listing more properties than we are selling. So there's lots of properties out there to take care of it. So yes. Hopefully this year will be a lot less drama than last year. Started out like gangbusters and then took a big pause, but, you know, kind of like the weather we've got outside. 2019 had a pause because we had 6 weeks of snow from February to March. Last year we had a pause because of a pandemic. Wasn't, as far as realtors had to do and selling homes, it wasn't very long. Completely different story for the home builders, the contractors out there who were off, 45 to 60 days in a lot of cases. So that put us a little bit behind the 8 ball, finishing up some projects. And I know Jeff will talk to you a little bit more about that. So to go through here, I talked about key factors that I like to look at. These things, any one of these, not, if we've got population growth, and employment decline, which would be odd, or we have a restriction on funding, interest rates go up. Any one of these is probably not going to adversely affect the housing market. It will maybe slow it a little bit. 2 out of the 3, absolutely. We could definitely see some major changes in how homes are sold and how long things are staying on the market. That being said, and I'll say this, I appreciate Aja Suljic and your employment security presentation last week, because it was nice to watch through that and go through her presentation and realizing that, in 2020, our population in the Tri-Cities, Benton Franklin County, didn't go down, didn't stay stagnant, it increased. So that's, there's always somebody that's looking for a house or going to need a house. Employment was down. It mentioned in one of our slides, 2.5% over the whole year, which to me is not huge. I won't say it's stagnant, but considering what we were going through, that's a whole lot better than what it could have been. And then on top of that, the way of getting money for mortgages, with interest rates at 3% or less, was incredible. I mean, we had a record year for residential housing sales in the Tri-Cities, and it's the best year I've seen in the 20 years I've been doing it. So as strange as it is to say, yeah, we're in the middle of a pandemic when you're supposed to be staying home and socially distancing. The market adapted to the conditions that we had, and people still need to buy homes and they still need to sell homes because life happens for them, and it doesn't matter what's going on, you got to get there. Coming up this year, I expect to see the similar growth. I don't see our population dropping off. I attribute it to, I've always thought that, I watched Spokane grow and they really got away from the Air Force being their major employer when they hit that 250,000 population level. And I always thought that, that probably would happen to the Tri-Cities with Hanford, although it's still a going force. But at 300,000 population, we have moved a little bit away from that, and we have a much more diverse, income. Of course, it's still mostly, for the non-farm stuff. So again, people still coming here, other than Four Seasons, and it's still, as crazy as we think the prices are, it's still a lot less expensive to live here than it is a lot of other places in the world, even in our own state. Jobs, employment, expecting that probably to be going up and recovering still more in this 2021. Depends on how things roll out, but high hopes for at or better employment than we've had, especially last year. As far as interest rates and getting money, I don't see any major changes there. I just can't imagine our administration nationally saying, hey, let's put some damper on or some brakes on one of the only industries that's helping keep our country afloat at this point, which is, again, it always is. The housing industry tends to be a big indicator of what's going on and how the whole world, or at least our country, works. So again, lots of things can happen there. Interest rates, they always say, they're going to go up. You should, get in now, but you're probably pretty good if it's 3%. 4% is not 3%, beats the heck out of 6, and 6 still beats the heck out of double digits. And I was presenting yesterday to Pasco Kiwanis, and the majority of their membership is, let's say, older than I am. And, talking to them about, you probably remember, having a mortgage potentially that was in double digits and compared to what we have now. So, I won't say it's rosy, but I do predict and look forward to as good as or better this year than we were last year. Give you some numbers, you know, I updated this from last year. I did actually, one column I did add is the second column there about total listings, and then total sold. You know, looking at those two, you can see over the years, you know, we typically have around 5,000, maybe a little bit more than 5,000 listings every year. And depending on how many we sold, you know, there you go. I mean, we still sold, you know, right around 5,000. So we still had houses that went on the market, came off the market, are still on the market now. But as long as we're listing more than we're selling, you know, I don't want to say to call it a shortage of housing, but we definitely have a revolving door, if you will. I mean, things are going off the market as fast as they are. And when you're seeing, you know, typically we're looking at, you know, hey, under 300, under 350, you know, multiple offers in most situations. You know, we're seeing them in the $600-700 range, $700,000 range, and moving up. The interesting thing about most of those upper end sales is you see a lot more cash sales, all cash and no financing. People coming from different areas or having gotten enough money out of the house they sold that, you know, they can, you know, potentially buy what they're looking for. The other thing to notice on this particular chart is the difference between new construction and existing home sales, the resale category. If you look down at 2011, we had a huge year. I can tell you that, you know, going back to the 2001, we typically are around 25%. 25% is a really safe number for new construction. And this is just sold. I mean, you see a lot more listings out there that are active, that are either to be built or under construction. So I like to use the sold number to show the difference, you know, and it's been that way. I don't expect it to change tremendously. I mean, could it get to 26, 27%? Yes. I know Jeff will talk some more about that, but if we can get some land opened up and developed more, we can't develop land fast enough. And the challenge with the land is getting it developed. When we do, the cost for that development has gone up significantly, just because of the price of land and requirements for planning and building departments to get us, you know, to meet their requirements. There's also some energy credit requirements that have just came up, and I know Jeff will talk about that some more too, just as of February 1st. So those are the main items there. I mean, you know, we can get you the slides. You'll have access to these slides. You can go look and see what the numbers are. Yes, obviously, everything's going above 300,000. You know, affordable housing is 300 and less at this point, if you can say that. I know I saw a question on there, the first one that popped up. You know, yeah, it'd be nice to get a $95,000 house in 77. It's crazy where now, you know, a quarter acre lot is now worth $100,000 or more. You know, you used to be able to buy the lot and have a house built for $100,000. Don't see that changing anytime soon. Prices just continue to go up. And lastly, just as a helpful hint here, that get that, there we go. Give you an idea of how our appreciation has been in the Tri-Cities for the last, you know, 40 years, if you will. Yeah, early 80s, yeah, not so good. Here, you know, focusing on current, you know, we've had really, really good appreciation. This is only through third quarter, but we expect probably at 5.5 to jump up to the through fourth quarter into the 8% range is what we're looking at. So that kind of wraps me up. We'll do questions, and if I can get better answers for you, I will.
That's great, John. You know, I had a question maybe before we get into Jeff's slides. And you mentioned Spokane and their economy related to Fairchild Air Force Base. And just like in the year that I've been here, a number of conversations have come up, and for a short time, I had some exposure to this group out of Spokane called the Spokane Kootenai Real Estate Research Committee, I think it's called. And they have a big, maybe not this year, but they have a big forum like about this time of year. And then they put out you know, you get a report that's about this thick of different data. And it started in the 70s. And the story that I heard from a guy that started it was that it was, you know, amongst the real estate, housing development, and even the municipal community, they had a need for data. And so they said, why don't we start working on this and then, you know, put this program together. They expanded into Kootenai County, and then, there's others, counties that have been included in like in the data set. But I appreciate when you talk about like the data that you look at predicting, is this going to be, is the housing market going to continue to rise or what's going on? But is there a need for, maybe a lot of us to work together to see what we can do about bringing more data to the table? I had a conversation even a couple of weeks ago with one of our board members, and he talked about like really large developers and saying like, well, when they look at their stuff, and I just wonder like, what are they looking at that, everybody else doesn't look at? And I think this whole housing affordability question that we had is a part of that, consideration, basically supply and demand, both on lots, zoning, and then, on construction and stuff. But I don't know if John or maybe Jeff, have you guys seen that group, or do you think there would be a benefit to having that discussion, amongst our community?
Actually, I believe Washington State has well, not the Real Estate Commission, but they, and I forget the name of it. They put together kind of like what you're talking about here. And yeah, the name is escaping me at the moment. But that's what they do, is they pull basically the real estate housing, real estate stats completely. I'll have to dig into that and I can send you some of that information and get you connected with them. But yeah, not to recreate the wheel. Yeah, they could probably always use some more data. It's just a matter of what they already have and finding their need and filling it.
Yeah.
There's a couple different groups that do that. Benton Franklin Trends, that's a good housing website that's created out of Eastern Washington University. And there's also the Washington State Center for Real Estate Research. That's another place that you go to get the information. We just happen to partner with the Benton Franklin Trends website, and that's got a lot of housing data, the homeless data. It's got all of those stats are in there, and so we refer to that one regularly.
Cool, that's great. And I've seen the Benton Franklin Trends from Eastern and Patrick Jones, and I think they'd worked on that Spokane initiative I was talking about. And now I guess this is for John, but I guess University of Washington has like a real estate research degree and maybe a division or something like that. So in Spokane, they switched from Eastern Washington to UW on that, because they actually had like grad students and undergrads doing, vacancy surveys to apartment owners and stuff like that in multifamily, which was kind of interesting. So anyway, there's some resources out there, but thanks, Jeff. Those are good references for us. Jeff, I think you got a couple slides. You want to jump into that, and then we'll spend the rest of our time on some question and answer time.
I do. Okay, so and very similar to what was just shared, in spite of everything that's happened with COVID, with construction being deemed unessential in Washington State, we were one of a few states where construction wasn't essential out the chute. And the only thing that wasn't essential was anything that was private construction. So government jobs, if it was a school, if it was any county facility, those were considered essential. Everything else with housing was not considered essential. So all that being said, and we had a 5-week shutdown. And in some of the numbers that I saw from Asia that showed the construction unemployment, those happened over a very short term. And we had several suppliers that were absolutely in limbo, just trying to figure out, if are they going to go unemployed? Are they not going to go unemployed? And trying to hit that balance. And then the other thing that made it more difficult, and I'm sure there's quite a few people on this call that understand this as well, which was some of these employees were able to make more money unemployed than they were being employed. And so getting them to come back was the other struggle. So as we go through this, those are some of the key points that certainly plagued us initially, but at the end of the day, we fared very well. So what this one is showing us is the GDP growth, and we can see down there in 20, obviously we slid backwards. As a total for the year, we ended up 3.6 down for 2020, but moving in 2021, it's projected that it's going to equal out the other way and be 3.6 higher percent GDP. And I think that on the national level kind of plays into what's happened into Washington State as well, which is we are the construction industry as a whole. So when we started this back in March, there was a big fear in Washington state that we were gonna not make the budget numbers, that the taxes and the revenues coming into our state governments weren't gonna happen. But at the end of the day, that wasn't the case. And one of the big reasons why is because of construction turning that land into homes. So how did the U.S. fare compared to others? Obviously, we didn't do as bad as some of the others. The U.K. being one of the worst at 11% slide going back the other way. And, you know, we're fighting a virus that's not unique. It's all around the world. The only one that had any positivity for gross domestic product growth was China. And so many of our products still continue to come from China. So they were able to still get out what they could and obviously help the rest of us. I think unemployment, I just showed those last week on how they fared on the local level. And I think it's important to look at it at the national level as well. On it. The trends are very much the same. In Tri-Cities, we don't always follow national trends, but obviously this was one that we couldn't avoid looking very much like the rest of the population. And what's so interesting about the unemployment trend and how it relates to construction is typically if there's no jobs, there's no houses. And that's usually the way it works. But obviously, this year is much different. When you talk about everything else that is different, the fact that we took 5 weeks off as an industry, but yet still outperformed 2019 with new single family permits pulled, beating it by 5%, was nothing short of a Herculean effort on the result of contractors who basically had to change all their processes over a matter of weeks to comply with the new safety measures and be able to work in this new COVID environment. So interest rates heading into what's considered a recovery from where we are is what we're getting from the national economists, from our sources, are that interest rates are going to tick a little bit higher as we go into this recovery. And looking at this, it's one of those things that, you know, when we talk about not enough homes on the market to meet demand, being a lot in labor shortages, to have these go up a little bit, it's probably not going to have that much of a change. And you can see the prediction is, even as we get out through 2022, it's still below 4%. So when we talk about going up, we're talking about going up from all-time lows, which isn't that drastic. What's the other thing that's driving the cost of housing as we talk about it? So in January of this year, there's your lumber prices. And so they're still off from the peak that they were. However, when new homes are being bid now, the stability of those prices is a very short window. Pricing for lumber, if you can hold that for a week at best, that's how long the bid is good for. But it's so volatile, even with the Canadian tariffs being dropped in half. We still have delays in supplies, in materials, and anytime there's an outbreak of COVID in one of these facilities, obviously, as we're aware of in Tri-Cities, there has to be a change in their processes. So all of that slowed everything down. So that's one of the things driving up prices as well as demand. The regulatory costs, so that's another hamstring, if you will, that's the Achilles that's getting when we talk about affordable housing. And John touched on it briefly about the energy code changing on February 1st. And I was getting phone calls from consumers saying, hey, my builder's telling me in January that the price of this house is going to go up $10,000 on February 1st. And I go, it's not a sales pitch. It's legit. I'm like, so what's happening in Washington state is, as we sit here in 2021, the pathway of the energy codes in Washington state is, by the time we hit 2030, all new construction will be passive. So a home will essentially generate all of its own power that it's going to need throughout the year. And with that comes costs. So this year, it's anywhere from $7,500 to $12,000 that gets put onto the cost of a new home. That's anywhere from 1,500 to 5,000 square feet. If it's over 5,000 square feet, it could be as much as $20,000. And here's where things are changing, where I think it's pertinent to Tri-Cities. So this map that was created by the National Association of Home Builders, those little dots that we're seeing on there from 2019 to 2020, there was a growth rate of 5.7% of single family construction in large metro core counties. And we're talking about LA County, we're talking about New York City, we're talking about Seattle. So they had a 5.7% growth rate. But then when you compare that to the single family in the smaller metro core counties, and so if you can see up there in Washington State, that includes places like Yakima, Benton, Franklin, Walla Walla, where there was a year over year quarter 19 to 20 of 12.3% growth rate. And what I think we're seeing with that is there is a move in this COVID environment from, could be Fortune 500 companies. I know of some Fortune 100 companies that have found out that their employees are able to be productive while at home and not sitting in a very, very costly hard space in downtown Seattle, San Francisco, LA, move that home office into your home. And so we see that there's potentially going to be a shift in where people are doing and conducting work. There could be more shared office space that's more appealing to some of these places that just need an occasional place, but it could affect commercial construction. There could be some more office retail that's there, but the pressure that we're getting for homes being sold. I know I just spoke with somebody a week ago in Boise, Idaho, and they have 50 homes on the market, and we've got just under 250. So, and it's very eerily similar to 2008, when I recall that there were 6 offers coming in on these homes in Boise, Idaho, sight unseen, money coming from Florida. It's very much the same. And so investors getting into the residential real estate market is not good. John showed the appreciation of homes at 5.5%. That's not bad, but in our current climate, even here in Tri-Cities, with the amount of demand that we have, there becomes a point that it's not healthy for us to continue to have these escalation in prices that's happening so fast, and driving the cost of housing up. And then couple that with the new energy codes and lot and labor shortages, and the prices are getting out of reach for a lot of different folks very fast.
That's a great point, and really is a good kickoff to our questions. You know, when it comes to housing affordability, and you know, I'm a new Tri-Citian, came down the river from Lewiston, but before that is in Sandpoint, Idaho. And leading up to the recession in 2008, you know, they had a big real estate bubble. And to your point about investors coming into your market, you know, at that point, they had so much speculation buying that was driven by, you know, all the derivatives and stuff in the mortgage finance industry and stuff, but then also from retirees. And I think that there's pockets, you know, here in the Northwest where you get housing demand that's from people retiring from California or something. They come out and
Sure.
do that. But that's an interesting trend where, you know, I mean, and my sense is here that our housing is being, you know, sold to people that are coming here for a job. They're not coming here to retire. They're coming here to work, whether it's remotely or in person. I don't know, John or Jeff, you have a sense of that? I mean, is that seems to be the trend, right? Like, we know that we do have a section of our population that's retired, but I don't know that we're like a magnet drawing retired people or baby boomers, you know, in for that community. Is that anything you're seeing, John?
Well, something, yeah, I've noticed was one of those things you think about. Again, for my lifetime, Hanford has been a major economic force in the Tri-Cities. And there's a whole nuclear circuit out there in the United States, and they work here for a while, and they go to Tennessee, and they go to, you know, all different places. What I've noticed over time is that, yes, I think we do actually have a more of a retirement community. Again, was more identifiable here a few years ago than it is now, just because, again, with the population and everything else growing as it is. But yeah, I think that most people were affordability, 4 seasons, they'd make that circuit and go, you know what? I think I like the Tri-Cities better than I like the humidity of other places. So I think that was, a big part of the retirement group. So yeah, I think we do have a very good part of that. But and yeah, having money coming in, my 2 cents on the 2008 versus now in the bubble. Yeah, I think they made changes enough to the financing, which I think was the biggest issue there. That we shouldn't have. I don't see a bubble breaking, like I said, unless you see a couple of those factors, all happen at the same time.
Sure. And then I appreciate both you talking about the increase in prices and this question of affordability. And again, I think in other communities, when you see the community saying, hey, we need to set up a affordable housing committee or something like that. I know like Moscow Pullman had one a couple of years ago. They hired a consultant. They did this big study. They're still working on kind of implementing some of those things. Boise that we talked about has some similar activities going on. And it seems like, an indicator when you get to that point is when folks that work in the public sector, your firemen and first responders and police officers, when they can't afford a house on their salaries, that seems to be kind of a triggering effect. And again, my sense is, without data in front of me, is that we're not there. I think that, our municipalities and the public do a good job of paying this working wage, that from that aspect that we're still affordable. But are either of you guys aware of anything, setting up some affordable housing committees or anything like that? Or what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think for starters, it's always on everybody's mind. It doesn't matter what jurisdiction, housing affordability is always an issue. And when we talk about housing affordability, we talk about housing affordability at all levels. And I know that depending on where you're at, and I'll use Walla Walla because that's one of our chapters, is they are setting up a land trust to create housing, but it's a different, when you talk about people that apply for a Habitat for Humanity house, it's a different type of affordable housing that we're talking about versus affordable to what you just mentioned, which is, ordinary people having a job should be able to live in that same community. And I think it's always good to have those discussions there, but it's always making sure that we're talking about the same affordable housing issues that comes up. But at the end of the day, I think most of our jurisdictions here, Pasco, Kennewick, Richland, West Richland, and the counties are all aware of the issues that we have going on. And because when we talk about the costs that go into, and we talk about regulatory costs, well, the permit, the infrastructure, and all of those things, as those go up with the jurisdiction, it rises the cost of those housing prices up. And our city council members, we have those discussions all the time. And I would say it hasn't led to a bigger discussion about to the tipping point of where we would consider people that are making median incomes that just can't find anywhere to go. I think there's other areas in Washington state that are having those issues. I know recently Lake Chelan that they're having troubles with VRBOs and vacation rentals, and it's absorbing all the homes in the market. So then the people that live there don't have anywhere to live, because then it's also driven up the price of homes. And we haven't obviously experienced that yet here in Tri-Cities.
Yeah. John, anything on that subject or thoughts about it? I mean, obviously, like, I appreciate, your sales per year, and that those have been fairly steady over the last few years, and that's across all price sectors. But from the Realtors Association, do you guys have this affordable discussion, and what are some things that you look at?
Well, we're always looking at that. And I know that our political action committee at the state level works on that quite a bit as well, and on trying to keep some things in play. Affordability.
Yeah.
Again, I like what Jeff said. It's like what qualifies as affordable. I mean, do we need $200,000 houses? I don't see that happening. Again, costs of building, all the stuff that Jeff talked about, in order to get some new affordable housing, we've got to have either a really big opening of land that gets developed, and we either get some sort of, I don't want to say a break, from our municipalities on developing these. I mean, putting curb, gutter, and sidewalk in areas that doesn't have curb, gutter, and sidewalk just drives the price up and makes it be a $400,000 house instead of a $300,000 house. because a $75,000 lot versus a $100,000 lot makes a huge difference in the price of a home.
You bet. No, for sure. We're getting some questions from out there. Maybe we'll just jump into this. This is for Jeff, and it might have been in your slides, but our own Carl Adrian is asking if you have a price per average square foot for construction in single family for Tri-Cities versus maybe other markets like Spokane or Eastern Washington communities. Is that, like you say, lumber prices and the new regulations and stuff, is that pretty steady, or do you see a flux in that price per square foot in different Eastern Washington communities?
All right, so I have to give you, and Carl, Adrian, I appreciate you asking that question, but like, I don't want to answer that question with a 10-foot pole. And honestly, it's one of those things that like, it's so hard to gauge because, as John can help me attest to, it depends on the components that are going into that house, which is it tile or is it wood? Is it granite or is it laminate? And maybe they put shag carpet on the ceiling. We don't know. And, all those things come into play. But we're reasonably priced. I mean, honestly, Yakima, Spokane, Tri-Cities have been battling it out for one of the least expensive places to live in the entire country over these last few years. And the numbers have changed a little bit, obviously, here recently, but we're typically towards the bottom. And so although the prices have went up precipitously here over the last few months, especially, we're still a very reasonable place to live. And I can't throw a number out there because I would get filleted by others, but I can't anchor it down there, but we're reasonably priced compared to other places to live. So, but if you want to go to Idaho, I know right now it's crazy over there. So yeah, you're probably going to pay twice per square foot, whatever that number is.
Good. And we like the advertisement for Washington too. That's a good answer. Here's one I think that's good for John, and it's about the urban growth boundaries in Benton and Franklin counties. And we, John, you mentioned a couple times land, and now if $100,000 for a lot is the going number and climbing based on availability, the question is, will new developable land supply offset the current record high prices for buildable lots? Like expanding the urban growth boundaries. Do you have a statement or a thought about that? Does that help? And that's kind of what you're talking about, right? We need more developable lots to increase the supply, and hopefully it meets demand a little bit.
If the growth boundaries grow, if they would get them out there a little bit farther than, I mean, I know every 10 years they do a plan and say, this is what we're going to do. And at this point, we're outgrowing what they've planned for. Yeah. And so, yes, having some more land available, it's going to be the tough part there is kind of like Jeff and throwing the price per square foot out there is property owners are seeing, these huge prices per acre for the land you're going to buy to develop. And at what point do they go, well, okay, no, I still need this high price. And then the developer has to go, oh, well, okay, no, I don't want to pay that because there's this other lot over here, but they're the same price per acre. So again, with more out there, it'll be what it is. And what happens in whether it's land, houses, commercial, it always boils down to what the motivation of either the buyer or the seller is. If the buyer wants it bad enough, they'll pay whatever they've got to have to get it, whether it's a house or an acre. And if the seller, needs the cash to fund another project, they may be willing to take a little bit less just so they can get it done and out the door. So, back to, the motivation part, but yes, I would love to see, more available land for development. It should help because then you'll have more competition. You'll have the initial land prices will probably stay up for a while, but with more land available and more developed land, you should see competition for those lots. So that'll help drive some of the lot prices down a little bit, but it'll only go down to the point that, the guy that developed it, company, whatever investor then developed it, is willing to, you know what, I can't make enough money on this. I'll just sit on it, see what happens.
Sure. That's a good point.
So Carl, before you go on, if I can add on to that, the urban growth boundary. So we're only one of 4 states left that still build under the UGA. Florida was the last one to abolish it. I hope in my lifetime that it goes away, because all we've done since it began, and I know it's back when it was dangled in front of the commissioners at the time to sign on to the urban growth boundary, and this act that is one of the tenets of it is to promote affordable housing. But when you draw a boundary around a city, and automatically you've created scarcity just by saying you can't go beyond this boundary, you've all of a sudden raised the price of land. And so, you know, the wisdom in creating this, I understand, but when you give cities the opportunity, and I'll use Southridge as an example for the city of Kennewick. So they got grants through the funding through Washington State to get the infrastructure out to the Southridge area. The developers put in the roads, the sewer, the gutters, and all the infrastructure that goes in, and then hand that back over to the city. So it's still all paid by the developer, but the city gets it out to a point, and then the developer is going to take it from there.
Sure.
So when those are allowed to happen in a free market situation, so last legislative session, the schools argued to site outside of the UGA. Do you know that we argued against that? Because they want to go outside the UGA, same reason we do, because land's cheaper.
Right.
So here we are in Washington State as one of the handful left that we still basically hamstring our jurisdictions on making the right decisions on where to build. And it just inflates the price of the land that's inside of those UGAs artificially by drawing this boundary, even though they may want to spread into this new area. And that really is, it's supposed to create affordable housing opportunities, and it hasn't done that. It's done the opposite.
So let's stay here for one more minute. And we did have a couple of questions about density, right? And I'm not a planner, I'm not an urban planner, but I've been around it long enough that I've at least learned some of the language. So I think at least philosophically, and I'm not taking a position by any means because we're totally on the same page, but you know, when you set those boundaries, the goal is, right, that you create more density, or the price and the demand drives up the need for building denser housing units. And that's very generally, I think, the philosophy. I think where we're at, maybe you guys can give me better information on this, is that just as you discussed, the price of housing, you know, the lumber, the regulatory, the permitting environment has increased at the same rate. So it's not just a land issue, it's all these factors that are driving housing. Is that kind of where we're at, and why we don't see a move to denser housing, you know, smaller lots? And I guess we've got multifamily, but you know, whatever those philosophical things are from a planning viewpoint, where you look at density versus urban growth.
Well, so all I can say is it depends, and it depends from the aspect of, so John mentioned it about the comprehensive plan. So the cities put together their comprehensive plan, which includes all the different residential zones. So from low density to high density and to lot sizes. So some of this stuff is higher level, and it has to come to a city that wants different, like every jurisdiction needs to have a varying models of residential densities.
Sure.
So you've got lower densities here, you've got higher densities here, and you make those plans for it. I think one of the most recent changes that's coming is tiny homes. And when we say tiny homes are 400 square feet, 600 square feet. They're tiny, but they could have a fit if they're done the right way for a certain segment of the population. And so, you know, I keep waiting, and I know we have some folks that have attempted this, but having a different density and all those different housing options always need to be on the table for every jurisdiction, because all we know is one size and one way to do it doesn't fit everybody, because depending on what stage of life you're in, whether you have kids, no kids, grandkids, you're downsizing because you're retiring, you want the starter home, all those things require a different type of home. And I think that's the hard part about all this planning, but all those things need to be available, which is always on the minds of all the planners when they put this together.
You bet.
So Jeff, you're saying that the federal government, when they put those 609 square foot prefabs in Richland, were just ahead of their time.
Yeah.
Those are
Was
some
that like
tiny houses.
The
and they're-
original tiny. Yeah.
1943.
Yeah, and again, and I'll tell you, at 609 square feet for a 2-bedroom-ish, 1 bath, and they're $300+ a foot. I mean, again, it's a function of the size of the home. I get it, but yeah, they're $180,000-$200,000. I mean, it's it's nuts, and they go like that.
Wow.
But and multifamily's been that way. I mean,
Yeah.
since I started this, we have duplexes, fourplexes, 5plexes, if you will, are always a premium. They're even more so now, and they're not as many being built, but being able to change some of that zoning to multifamily would be helpful, in some places. Now, that being said, then you get the neighbors that rise up and go, well, I don't want a bunch of duplexes or fourplexes in my neighborhood.
Sure.
Okay, well, the highest and best use of land is usually the best route to go. And that's what the planners and the commissioners are looking at and trying to get things, developed properly for their own cities.
Yeah. John, do you see, with folks maybe that are new to the market or coming in the market, like say for a job or retired or whatever, draws them to the Tri-Cities? You just talked about the demand for multifamily, but do you see people that are looking for different types of housing than we have available right now, that maybe are smaller or denser or something like that? Or do you see the demand that really is fairly matched up, at least directionally, with the type of home that's being built?
Well, I've been seeing, quite a few more, again, developments all over the Tri-Cities that are, a 6,000, 7,000 square foot lot. Yeah, they're selling because there's nothing else out there. But the majority of people want, that call it traditional quarter-acre lot or quarter-acre-ish lot, or maybe a little bit more, because it fits their house. They get the yard. It's But yeah, there's, again, like Jeff said, there's so many different parts of the market that, hey, I got a retired couple or retired people that are coming in here. I don't want a yard that I got to take care of. So I'm going to get a condo or a townhome or just something that's on a tiny lot. So I don't have to spend all day mowing the yard because I want to go out and golf. You've got that aspect. And then you've got, hey, I've got, 10 kids and they all know how to run a lawnmower. So we get an acre. Until we get a more unified buying public, and I don't see that ever happening. The diversity is going to have to stay there in the housing market. So,
you bet. All right, we did have a question about Jeff. You talked about people working from home, and the question is, do you think that there would be a demand for a different type of home? Like I don't know, a bigger home office or different type of construction within the home itself, that would be more applicable to working from home. And maybe it's too early to see that, but do you have a thought or a prediction about that?
Well, and John can probably speak to it too, but I know that there's already been a push from the remodeling community to convert some of the existing homes to accommodate for that. And I believe the builders going forward with some of the new construction that's going to happen. And I think sometimes the den is a relative offshoot of the house, which it becomes the Christmas decorating, the Halloween, and it becomes the collector area. But now it's like, all right, well, so if that's not going to happen, then yeah, we need to have that storage area somewhere else so we can actually use that. But that is a lot of the conversation that's happening to allow for those home offices to develop and move them from the bedroom or the cluttered den to an area that's actual workspace. And we are seeing that trend.
Oh, I concur 100%. Yeah. And in the new stuff, yeah, you're going to start seeing things that are, I'll call it a flex space, if nothing else, because you'll use it as an office. If you need the bedroom, you'll use a bedroom and you'll figure somewhere else to have your little office space, or again, like me, a bonus room over a garage, sets you up to work from home and be on your Zoom meetings and whatever needs to be. So that actually working with a builder here in Pasco that trying to come up with some single story house plans and thinking ahead of making them more smart related, wireless,
Sure.
and having some extra space somewhere, again, whether that's in the back of a third bay of a garage or literally building it into the house. Definitely is on the minds.
Oh, that's great. Let's see, for John, we do have a question about what is the peak time for home buying in the Tri-Cities? Do you see some seasonality in the buying season? And I think I already know the answer, but
When there's no snow on the ground.
okay.
Again, in the years of doing this, the only time I've seen any real slowdowns, well, let me take that back. We are cyclical in Tri-Cities. If the weather's good, January 1, the market starts picking up. Your best times of the year, the most sales tend to be June, July, and August. And usually right before, kind of the fair, things kind of slow down. School starts, the fair. I always love the parade of homes. Hopefully we can have another one of those one of these days. That's in-person stuff. Really kicks back off a fall market that, from 1st of September through the end of October, and Halloween, is kind of the indicator. About Halloween through the first of the year, the market tends to drop off. People are busy with holidays and it's getting cold out, but there's still a good market. And I guess as a comment on the market, how long do we have to be in a market like we are in before that becomes, that's just the way the market is? This is not, 2008, 2005, 2015, when we had 600 to 1,000 houses on the market. If we're under 500, have been for 4 or 5 years now. So this is, I won't even use the word new normal. Sorry, it's not normal. It's just, it's what we're at. And this is the market we're going to be in until there are some significant changes externally.
What would some of those be? I know we've talked about them, obviously more land. We had a discussion about the regulatory environment and permitting and stuff like that, but any other changes that we need to look at to maybe, even out? I don't want to say lower demand's good in many sectors, but how do we even that out? Or what are some more ideas maybe that we haven't talked about yet, John?
A public relations campaign says, don't come to the Tri-Cities.
I can tell you from Idaho, they tried that and it didn't work.
All it is when you tell somebody don't do that, they want to do it more because you told them they can't do it. It's hard to say. Again, the building more homes is going to help. Having the cost be as down as much as possible. I mean, the only way that's going to make sense is builders got to make money, developers have to make money. If they're not making money, they're not going to do it. And then it stops. And then houses sit. Again, interest rates, and like Jeff pointed out, don't expect them in the next couple of years to even tick above 4. Our population suddenly stopping, employment suddenly crashing. Those are the real big ones. I mean, all the municipalities are doing what they can to put their best idea forward, and they listen to the home builders, they listen to the realtors. They have been reaching out more and more to, hey, how do we make this a better place for all of us? And so it's getting there. But yeah, short of, like I said, external factors that we really don't have any control over, I wish I had better news.
Yeah, totally. Jeff, anything else we haven't talked about what helps us even out supply and demand for residential housing here?
No, I mean, everything that helps even it out, like John mentioned, is bad. It's going to be bad news because either the interest rates have to go up to a level that prompts people to not want to make those purchases to help slow it down, or you start losing jobs. And neither one of those are things that either one of us aspire to have happen. So, we're just going to have to see. We're still saying that inflation is probably a couple years out on getting hit with, as we just keep sending checks out, eventually that's got to be paid for. And, inflation, we're predicting somewhere around 2020 into 22, possibly 23, that pressure starts coming on to us. So then we'll see what happens after that.
Yeah. Maybe one more quick question. Do you know of any additional regulatory requirements that we haven't talked about being proposed or statewide or nationally? So we talked about the regulatory driving prices up, but is there anything else that's being discussed statewide or nationally that might increase prices even more?
Well, in regards to that, the most interesting thing about additional requirements. So we're already one of the most strict states when it comes to energy code.
Mm.
So every other state in the union, besides probably Oregon and then next California, are all catching up to where we are. Everybody else in the US is well behind from where we are. So it's hard to have those. The other pressures that we get from the regulatory side comes on the general contractor issues, where it comes down to the labor and how they're paid and who their employees are, and trying to make every subcontractor an employee of the general contractor, which would drive prices through the roof. So but typically those are items that we deal with on a yearly basis in the legislature, and it's no different again this year, but that's the only one that I know about right now.
Okay. John, anything you see coming down the pike, or anything like your associations are discussing or anything?
Nothing big. They're again still fighting. Call it the good fight on. And I don't have specifics. I was actually not in town when they had Hill Day and went to meet with the legislators and discuss what was going on. Even though it was via Zoom, I couldn't log in from where I was at for some reason. Imagine that. But short of excise tax changes, last year, which was wonderful. I mean, depending on how big a property you were selling or what the volume was of your price of your house, you actually save some money selling stuff, and that affects homeowners. But yeah, I mean the biggest one is these the green codes that were the energy efficiency codes that Jeff talked about. Probably the biggest thing, and that was an instant hit as of February 1.
Yeah. Well, and you guys gave the numbers on that. That goes right to the bottom line. That's a big increase. We're really at the end of our time together, but we didn't give you guys very much notice, but we really appreciate you coming on. And this was a really good discussion. It helped me, again, until somebody tells me I'm not the new guy, I'm going to keep on claiming being the new guy, even though I've been here now. Helps me understand you and spend a little time with both of you guys, even if it's remote. And I did want to bring up that I saw Jeff in my research was named the local EO of the year from the National Association of Home Builders. So Jeff, congratulations. I think that's a cool thing. Wanted to give you a shout out for that. But
thank you very much.
You bet. Do you want to lead us off, Jeff, and just some closing remarks before we wrap up here today?
Yeah, thank you very much to TRIDEC for having this forum. I think it's a great opportunity. I like having the opportunity to talk about what's happening in the construction industry, in residential construction specifically. And I really hope for better days coming forward in 2021. Right now, it doesn't feel like it at all, but we really hope that we can have a in-person parade coming this fall, because we are planning for it. We have builders signing up for it now. So with that, I will thank you, Carl, and thank you, Tracy, for being a super organized and making this happen.
Totally. Thanks a lot, Jeff. John, some closing remarks, and thanks again for joining us today.
Not so much closing. I appreciate being here. We'll echo what Jeff said. Carl, Tracy, thanks for putting it together. Yeah, like I said, it was a little last minute. I'm like, wait a minute, huh? But not a problem. I mean, I love this format. Again, doing this last year and being able to do it in a different format like this. This really helped the short notice, if you will. Much easier to get together, and I'm sure it was easier for you and Tracy to get this put together. Jeff, always, known Jeff for a long time. Always appreciate his input in the industry, and he is definitely the source to talk to, especially about new construction stuff and how the home builders work. As far as getting back to the market, it is what it is. Yeah, we've got 240-ish houses on the market. One's a $3.8 million house in Badger Canyon, and we got a $35,000 manufactured home on a rented lot, and there's 338 in between.
Wow.
400. So 400 and some in between. Yeah, there's not a lot. But that being said, keep looking. Everything pops up new every day. There are constantly houses coming on the market and going pending and going off the market every 30 to 45 days. So if you're looking, look. If not, stick where you're at. You got a great place to live. You don't have to sell. Don't sell, because if you're going to buy, you're going to pay a great price, even though you got a great price.
Great point. John and Jeff, thanks again for your time. Thanks everybody for joining us today. And we'll be in touch with our next meeting, but for sure we'll be back next Friday. So thanks again for joining us this morning, guys.
Thank you.